So, everyone, welcome to the Second Dimension Live. I'm here today with Andy Coyle and Megan Ferguson from Hilda and the Mountain King. Obviously, this is live, so if there's any issues with audio or anything, feel free to let us know in the chat. How are you doing, guys?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing great.
Awesome. That was my guys to check your audio level.
Yeah. How clever.
No, but yeah, so I guess I know we already did an interview, but kind of just a bit of an introduction to what you guys did on the Hilda movie specifically and what was special about working on this movie.
Okay, well, you want to start, Megan? Introduce yourself and
warm up the crowd.
Let's do it.
So yeah, I'm Megan. On the Mountain King, I was like primarily animation director. I was sort of like on the end of season 2 and then rolled right into the animation on the Mountain King. So it was definitely, I think what was special about this movie is that, well, we knew it was coming, right? So it was one of those things where it still felt like our project wasn't complete yet because we had finished season 2, but now we had this like big thing to do. But looking back on it, I think it was a really unique project, not just from the story, but just sort of what we accomplished, because it was all new. And then we all did it from home, so it's more than just like something like a big feat creative wise. It really, for a lot of us, was a really big learning curve, like production wise, and just all the technical stuff even outside of the story. So yeah, it was definitely like a whirlwind, but we kind of came out of it stronger. So it was really an incredible experience.
Yeah. And for you, Andy?
Well, I'm Andy Coyle, and I directed the movie, and I'm the supervising producer. It was a great, fun time. I don't know. It was definitely something that ended up being, I think, pretty cool in the end. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm very proud of the work that was done on it, and I feel really good about where it ended up. And I'm really happy that it's out and people are watching it, and it's it's for everybody to enjoy now. That's the best part. It's when you're making it and you're in it, it's kind of a blur, and you're just trying to just do the best you can in every sense of whatever you can do to contribute to the movie. And then when that part's over, you kind of just hold your breath and you go, okay, here you go, let everybody watch it. And then the whole point of it is people experiencing it, which has been happening now for about a few weeks now. When it came out on December 30th, so it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah,
it's been out.
It's been a little bit. I actually forgot to press record, so I'm gonna go ahead and
recording in progress.
The record, so I have that for the records. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the questions. First one, where did the idea to turn Hilda and the Mountain King into its like a feature film originate? How did that start?
Well, it started essentially it was born out of the idea of the gap between seasons 1 and 2, and how the nature of making the show meant that we would have to like stop when we finished our season, and then you'd find out, okay, are we going to get renewed for another season? Is this going to work? And then by the time that decision is made, the show had been completed for some time. Then you have to sort of get the band back together and go back out on the road, and it's a big ordeal to gather everybody back up and rebuild the team. And so we knew after that experience of the big gap between seasons 1 and 2, which ended up being like 2 years in everybody's experience of watching it on Netflix, that we didn't want to have that happen again. So it was born out of that sort of brainstorming session of, okay, how do we get around that without, like, if we weren't going to do a whole new full season, maybe it's something that we could figure out a way to do something supplemental, some kind of a special event that wouldn't be as big of a bite to chew off as a full season. But and luckily that sort of nicely complemented the desires of Netflix, and it fell into place from there.
And that was when it was a 70-minute movie, right? That was how it was pitched.
Yeah, that was the original idea, was we were going to do a 70-minute movie. And obviously, I mean, we were working pretty fast and furious through it, and the story we were adapting was quite big. And during the process, it just became clear, like, okay, well, this is just very large. And normally our stuff is large anyway. Like our rough cuts, when I first cut together animatics for shows, they usually run pretty long, and our scripts are long, and like it's just part of the process of making the show. But in this instance, it was like exceptionally long. Our first cut of the movie was something like 90 something minutes.
Whoa.
And that was before I had really gotten everything to work. So it was looking like, okay, it is going to be even longer. And when we started broaching that idea, the idea still was to cut it down to 70 minutes. And then there were talks about like, well, what could we reasonably afford to do? Because the big thing about producing animation is that footage is expensive, and it's not like in live action when you just let the cameras roll and then you just chop stuff in editing. Everything has to be created, and it costs a lot of money. And so 95 minutes of animation costs a lot more than 70 minutes of animation.
Absolutely.
And so that was sort of the issue with the movie's runtime. It had to sort of go back and be rethought of in terms of the scope and size of what we were going to do in a way that would like reasonably tell the story in a way that felt natural, without being too pie in the sky exorbitant. Like we weren't going to make a 2-hour movie. It was just see how much we really needed to really tell this story. And it's funny because it actually came down to like the last minute too, where like we had all kind of tacitly agreed, like, okay, that seems like the plan, we're going to do our cut, and we're going to move forward with this. We haven't gotten like full approval yet on the new budget, but it looks good. Everybody seems like at least casually on board, and so there shouldn't be much problem. And then it like time kept going by and the clock's ticking down, and then it's like, okay, we're doing all our post design, and we're like, okay, we can like design all this stuff, it's all good. And then like, okay, we're finishing up all of our builds and our stuff, we're getting ready to launch into like shot layout, and we still haven't gotten an approval on this. And so we're like, oh, I don't know, it should be today, it should be today. And then that day comes and goes, and you're like, oh no. And then we get to like the week before layout was supposed to launch on the movie to draw. Layout is basically like where we do the black and white line art drawings of all of our shots, all our backgrounds. And in order to do that, you kind of need to know what shots are in the movie. And we did not yet have approval on the expanded budget. So I got a call from Chantel and Kathleen, who was the producer and production manager on the movie. And they told me and my editor, John, that we were going to have to cut the movie down to 70 minutes to start layout on Monday. And so me and John are in this meeting, and we're like, oh, okay, all right, well, and so we're trying to articulate to them, like, this isn't like a TV show, right? Like, we can't just like sit down and do a new pass in an afternoon. This is going to take a lot of work. If you just sit down and press play and don't do anything, this takes 2 hours. Like, we this is going to take us some time. And they're like, okay, well, let's just see what we can do. And so me and John both, like, you could tell we didn't really know what to do, but we were like, okay, well, we're gonna go have lunch, and then we'll come back, and then we'll start thinking about this. And the whole time, both me and him are like, oh no, this is going to be really, really hard to do, because we had already trimmed it down to like as tight as we felt like we could do it without starting to have to lose material.
Right.
And so we went and had lunch, and we were both like super dreading this whole thing. And then came back to the studio, sat down in the edit suite, and we were like, okay, let's take a look at this and see what we could do. And just as we were about to start, he got a message from Chantal, like, never mind, actually the budget's approved, everything's cool, we can just go forward.
Woo.
And we were like, oh, thank God, because we didn't want to tell you, but we had absolutely no idea how we were going to cut this down to 70 minutes.
Yeah.
It was totally like flying by the seat of our pants, but it worked out in the end. And I think I'm like eternally grateful for everybody seeing sort of the value in the runtime of the movie, and not going, that arbitrary sort of mandate of just being like, no, budget's this, we got to cut this down. And allowing us to make, a bigger, more full story that felt more satisfying. Because I wouldn't have wanted to cut out more than we absolutely had to.
Yeah, and you need that extra time, especially in a movie like this where there's so many moments of just contemplation and, and Hilda as a whole.
Yeah, it's always the struggle, is like maintaining the atmosphere and the mood and the pace. I don't want the show ever to be like a manic experience. So it's a priority to maintain that stuff. But there's also, logistical concerns of story where you're like, well, I need to have this stuff in here or else this will not make sense.
Yeah.
So you start having to make sacrifices on things, and it can get brutal, and it's very difficult, especially if you're really close to the material and you feel really attached to it, where you're like, oh man, there's so many things in the show that people don't get to see that I'm like, oh, there's a scene that exists there that nobody saw. There's so much material like that.
Maybe one day we can get the deleted scenes compilation when the series is done and Netflix is making a Blu-ray set.
Yeah, we'll put it all in, all the librarian material from season 1.
Oh, interesting.
There was so much of it, and it was just a difficult character to crack. Like, we couldn't quite figure out the take on her yet, because she was in a lot of episodes in season 1 and had a lot more material, and it just kept getting like lost, because we were like, this isn't working. This is like bogging down our episode, and it's not important to the plot. So we just gotta, like, rather than spend all of our effort and time making that work, let's get rid of it and let's figure out these other problems we need to really make shine.
Right.
So she got like cut down, and then finally when we were producing the Tide Mice, I think it was, that's when we were like, oh, we got this character, we know exactly who she is, and all of a sudden it all clicked in place for her. But by that point it was like, oh, well, now we don't have a lot of opportunities to like bring her back and explore. So we knew going into season 2 that was going to be a character we wanted to give a little bit of spotlight,
Yeah, I got some people asking in the chat, what time period is Hilda set in? Do you guys have a specific time period you go off of, or like a decade range?
It is intentionally nebulous. Like what I'm trying to do with the show is create a sense of familiarity, but also a sense of other place and time, right?
Right.
So that's why Hilda's world feels like vaguely Scandinavian and British and North American, and all of these things like combined together. It's because it isn't like any specific place. You always, when you watch it, I want people to feel like there's something familiar about this, but there's something foreign about it too.
Yeah.
And that there's like a way to view the world that way that I think it like draws you in, but also gives you a different perspective on it. And the same thing with the time period. I feel like I want it to feel like you can't quite pin down exactly where it is. Obviously, we have a lot of influence from sort of some retro time period type stuff that just sort of is a symptom of like a lot of us growing up who work on the show during a certain period of time, and that our childhoods obviously all affect the way we explore this story about being a kid and growing up. Like it just it sort of gets infused into there. So there is no real specific thing, but I mean, if you really want to like pin it down, you can vaguely say it's like very sort of early 90s influenced, but it isn't a specific thing. And I think sort of going down that rabbit hole and trying to pinpoint the year of it, to me, feels like unsatisfying and off from like the spirit of the world of Hilda.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's just before cell phones, anytime before cell phones.
It's going to be different things to different people, you know, because like everyone's going to pick up on different little cues and stuff that they relate to. But yeah, childhood for sure. Like even designing some of the props, it was like, oh, like Frida's phone. So I sent the designers like a bunch of like phones that I wanted to have when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, like the big lips or the donut phone or something, like, you know, anything like that, we tend to kind of throw things like that, and some stick and some don't, but it's just like an amalgamation of the aesthetic and lives and whatever of anybody who works on Hilda, really.
Yeah. So were there any, kind of hopping off deleted scenes, were there any deleted scenes that you had to cut from the film that you guys miss or you wish could have been put in?
There's lots of stuff that like during the process of forming it was removed, and also like trying to figure out how to incorporate everybody was something. Some characters got some material removed and things.
Is there a woodman scene?
No, there was never a woodman scene. That would have been cool, but it ultimately that would have also opened a whole like can of worms. There was stuff, like a character that actually got removed from the movie was the bellkeeper, and that was purely just for like budgetary and scope reasons, where we were like, his role wasn't very big. It's essentially that character, you know, at the wall, like one of these like safety patrol guards who's training David's mother.
Yeah.
Was originally the bellkeeper.
Gotcha.
And so obviously those scenes kind of played out a little differently that character's in. Like that's the character who sees Hilda and rings the bell when she's running at the wall. He's the guy who is training David's mother, and then at the end of the film, his tower is destroyed. And a lot of detail a lot of people don't really catch is that he survives that impact.
Oh.
If you freeze frame it and go frame by frame, you can see he ducks down and goes into the door before the thing explodes. And that if you look at the shot where all the safety patrol guards are pulling up to the thing, you can see him coming out of the tower and he joins the safety patrol guards.
That's so cool.
And ultimately those scenes would have played out differently with the bellkeeper. They were different, but it was a matter of like, oh, we're going to bring this actor back for like just these couple little moments. And then it just felt like we could do without it, and that could be something that I could compromise on and sort of just use a more simple, flexible background character to achieve those moments.
Because you want to keep the focus on David's mom and her role in the story versus...
Yeah, and it gets more complicated when you introduce the bellkeeper, and there's all dynamics you have to worry about. So it simplified things, and it really, I think it's a shame because I do feel like it would have been really like, it just would have been great for the world to have him in there, and you could see it. But it also makes total sense that he wouldn't be there too, because of the way things ended in episode 6 of season 2. So that's one thing that kind of got taken out. There was stuff that never really made it to like a storyboard or like a visual thing, but there was lots of stuff about like the witches and stuff that I was trying to work out.
like the Committee of 3 or
Yeah, like more library, more Kaiser material that I really wanted to have her incorporated into the climax somehow, because I wanted to make it really clear that like her character, like that she would rebel against the idea that like the sort of current sort of order of witches would forbid this kind of a thing, but that for these kids, she's like, no, I should do something. And I think the only justification for her not doing it is that she would be told why.
Yeah.
But I think it just ultimately also was like a thing where it's very difficult to manage all those threads without taking away from stuff we really need to focus on, especially with the limited amount of screen time that we have. And so it became a thing that ultimately I felt like I could sell with her performance in the library, that like you get that she does care and that she wants to help but she can't, and that doesn't assassinate her character in any way.
Right. Somebody said, yeah, I was just sitting there at 3 a.m. like, did Trundle just take a man out?
Hey, if that's how people see it, that's cool too.
We were just adding to our body count again. Nice.
Which scene was the biggest challenge to execute in the film, either from just a technical perspective or a story perspective? Either one works.
Megan probably know best for technically what was the biggest.
The hardest technical scenes. I would say, at least from an animation standpoint, like the effect scenes, there are some tech, like for effects, some really hard, intense effect stuff. The scene where Hilda, she kind of lands in the dream, and then she's like, oh, I'm human again, and then she gets like yeeted up into the sky and everything turns. That scene I had planned out before it had even gotten to animation, because it had to be built in such a specific way to like pull off everything. I would say the scenes where the like Frida's mother comes out of like Frida's vision, that one was pretty tricky too. A lot of those are like combinations of like layout, character animation, effects. Sometimes like there's CG incorporated. So yeah, the hardest scenes are the ones that sort of bring in all of those elements and they all have to mesh together. Oh wait, the car crashing scene.
Yeah, that was great.
That one's the hardest. I hated that one.
Wait, is this the shot where the city's starting to come up and everything's slipping? Okay.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's a lot of different elements. You know, you need to have a layout and background designer design the cracks, and like this is where it starts and this is where it ends. And actually, you know, we have character builds, make a rig of a cracked ground that we animate up, and then we have the CG cars, and so everything has to work together. And it means like you have to go over the scene like several times. Every time a new element comes in, you have to go in and track the amount of work to make it like cohesive is a lot. So there were a lot of really huge technical scenes that were complex, but I will say that, you know, our production team absolutely amazing on like this show. So we planned a lot of it before it got to animation. I don't like planning, like fixing things on the fly. So we did have all these complex shots, but we're such a great like team dynamic, and we catch it up front that it's like we have the plan, you know. So it all went smoothly. Yeah, and don't talk to anybody on the crew about troll crowd shots anymore. If they don't want to hear about the trolls, no more trolls.
Yeah, there was some of those shots like when Trundle's brother rushes him and then gets jumped by the horde of
that was really tough too. Yeah,
laid down. It was like, it's like there are a lot of really super complex scope stuff that we were trying to pull out, and we were trying to do it in a really sort of economic and efficient way to be able to pull that stuff off. And it did go really well. Surprisingly, that wasn't really, at least from my mind, that stuff wasn't the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I
in
agree.
the production of the movie. There was a lot more performance stuff that we were really trying to work with and get like the most out of. That ended up being way more challenging than having 100 trolls on screen
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is sort of like it's heavy in terms of like technical thinking, but the unsaid things, and acting is always a really hard thing to do in animation, because a character, a lot of people sometimes will hear dialogue and then they'll make the character act to the dialogue, when in reality the character isn't acting to the dialogue, the character is acting to their internal feelings, because we don't always say what we mean, right? And
Right.
in this movie, because there is so much emotion, you need to know the context, you need to know what's leading up to it. And at this point, a lot of us are really ingrained, and we want Hilda to feel like Hilda, and we need to establish these emotions without saying them outright. We just need the audience to feel them and come along. And it's hard to get enough room to be able to do that sort of acting, because most of the time spent doing animation sometimes is just getting the thing done, not even like being able to elevate it to this level. So it is very tough. All the subtle stuff, all the emotion, all of that is way harder than group shots, even though group shots are still a big pain in my butt.
Yeah. There's a lot of great Joanna moments in this film where you just kind of like let her character performance just kind of go crazy.
Oh, yeah. Actually, a lot of them were done by Naomi Edwards, who was one of our senior animators, and she's just so great with those scenes. Like they tug at my heartstrings every time. She did the one where Joanna was like pounding at the the wall, and she did the scenes where like Hilda like came into her mother's arms and her mom like spin around, like went down. Like it was just like a lot of the animators like really leaned into it, but yeah, she had a lot of those really emotional shots and she nailed them.
Yeah. Let's see. What challenges specifically did making the film during the pandemic have on production? Was that something on season 2, or was this like the movie was when you had to adjust to the new form of production?
Well, for different parts, like for season 2, we had finished our storyboarding and sort of cutting our animatics together and getting everything prepped.
We were mid animation.
Yeah, we were
when
in
it hit.
animation on season 2 when everything shut down. But I literally had just started the storyboards on the movie when that happened. And it definitely was difficult. Like it did have some impact on our ability to just keep things moving, obviously, especially at first, because it was so unexpected in terms of the scope of it. Like even when it first happened, you think, okay, well, how long is this going to last? Like,
Right.
a month, 2 months, like let's prep for getting through this whole process of story, at least through this kind of a pipeline. And then, start to realize, okay, it's going to last longer than that. So how are we going to do design? And how are we going to do all these other things that moving into the animation? Like, how are we going to build a team of, like, when you're building teams of story artists, you're talking about, at least in the scope that we work with on Hilda, a small team. Like, we don't have a lot of people, but when you're talking about animation, you're talking even a small team of animators is like 20 animators, and so them plus people to supervise and assist and like supplemental people to help with all the logistics of the production. You're talking about like sometimes like 40 people at once on a team. And how do you get a team like that to work as like a unit when it's just they're so disconnected? And luckily we had some experience from the end of season 2, like trying to figure out how to do that, but it was only a couple episodes, at the end of season 2 that were really in animation during that part.
It was like the second half of the Stone Forest, I think we were doing when it happened.
And we didn't do that last, actually. The Stone Forest, we did not animate the Stone Forest
no.
as the final episode of the season. That was in like, there were still a couple episodes after that we did production wise.
Yeah, I think there was like two or three more after that. But
Yeah.
So we were kind of like not right at the end, but we were like getting to the end of animation. So, but yeah,
it definitely had an impact, really. Like I don't want to say it was like disastrous or anything, because it wasn't necessarily completely negative. It was such a different thing to deal with that was not at all how you normally make stuff, and we just had to figure out how to get through that process. And I still feel somewhat like I wish I could have more people together and be able to sit down and really be creative and spontaneous and improvise stuff together and come up with things that you only really get that energy when you're like together. Because even if you're on a Zoom call with everybody, you only one person can speak, and then the mic's cut off for everybody else. Everybody else has to mute themselves, and it's not the same kind of energy as having everybody in a room jamming on ideas. But like, for the most part, I was still able to work with certain people who I could have contact with, just very few of my key people, to make sure that we were on the same page and feeling good. And there was a lot of hard work that was done by supervisors of every department, that was to just keep everybody checked in and connected. So it's like, I do wish this would end, but
we're keeping our heads above water.
We can handle it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's everyone's found like at least a bit of a groove now, so
that's good. Somebody asked, obviously can't say anything about season 3, so don't ask about this, but somebody said was speculating, should we worry about Trundle returning as a ghost? So lore wise, do trolls have ghosts?
No, I would say.
No troll ghosts?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
The nature of trolls is so like fundamentally different than the nature of humans. It's or other animals. These are like magical psychic manifestations of Earth that are like, that come from the mind of an ancient giant. It's a little different than ghosts.
Yeah. I even see too, and this is something that, we do try to keep in mind when we're doing creatures like trolls and giants, something that's, or even elves, a creature that isn't human, but obviously we can relate to them because they speak and they have emotions, all that kind of stuff. But there is a difference in terms of thought process, and they're not human. The trolls are not human. Like I saw some people being like, oh, didn't Trilla know she stole a child? And it's kind of like, she doesn't. I mean, it's more of she did a thing for her daughter, but it's like the they don't have all the same kind of stuff. We do elaborate on the Mountain King, but it's like you want to keep a bit of a separation and it like a little bit more ambivalence, to the other kind of creatures to set them apart.
Yeah.
It's also a thing too where like you have to think in terms of how they see the world. That was a big part of what the movie was about, was that they see things differently than the humans do. And that, imagine even just the time scales of experiencing the world, and you don't have a lifespan like a human does. You know what I mean? That there's a different way of seeing the world when you can lay down to have a nap and a city can appear on top of you. Like time means something different. And so I think that also can be extrapolated upon when you're thinking about the trolls and how they view the world, because there's, I think, obviously varied different kinds of trolls, but Trundle and his brother have been around for a long time.
Right.
And like they would see the world very differently than you or I.
I know one question I saw in one of the reviews I was watching was, what was the idea behind Joanna leaving Hilda's hat on that one troll during the search, and then she kind of picks it up back later. But she kind of just, when she's going through looking at the trolls, she just leaves it on one of the trolls and then kind of walks away from it. What was the idea behind that?
Well, it was ultimately, it's just a distraction. Like she becomes momentarily distracted from her mission.
Yeah.
Um, and that while she's willing to sort of, she's empathizing with the trolls, right? And so I
Right.
think when she's out there looking at these different troll shapes and comparing them to Hilda and imagining, is this Hilda or is this somebody else? And then that starts to, in your head, just come together as this idea like, wait, this is somebody else. And these are somebody else's. And then she starts to think like, oh man, I am connecting. I'm like, because I can see my daughter now in these things, I now can see them as more than what I saw them before. And that briefly, I think, gives her a purpose that is not just I am me against the trolls. You know what I mean?
Right.
It connects her to the trolls a little bit more. And the hat is just to symbolize her sort of leaving behind that like singular idea of trolls bad, give me my daughter back type black and white thing.
Yeah.
And then also it's a great little callback at the end when Hilda gets her hat back, which if you watch closely, you can see we made a screw up in a scene where like she has her hat before that.
Oh no.
And it's on me too, because I knew about it and had it. I was gonna remove it and fix the scene, and I completely dropped the ball on it. And so if you look real close, you can spot a scene in between when Hilda turns back into a human and when she gets her hat back to her during the rush through the wilderness. You'll spot a little Hilda hat in there, and it drives
Everyone's
me.
going to Netflix now. Like, where is it? Where is it?
Drives me bonkers every time I see it. But this stuff happens. Like you
Yeah.
do your best to like. It's just a little mistake.
There's always going to be one. There will always be. It's impossible to get everything, even if you think you've gotten everything, and even if you're like Andy, who has gone through every frame, and like the amount of love Andy puts in to checking every frame and making sure everything is clear is immense. And still, with all of that, they always sneak through. There's always one.
I thought I had it. I thought this one. I was like, I did it. I scrubbed every single frame of every shot that's in this movie, and I have had my fingers in every pixel that everybody's going to see. And then this gets past me, and I go, I knew about that too. I had it on my list, and somehow it got off my list, and I did not do it, and I will forever kick myself for it. But at least everybody can imagine it's just a line error. Someone was sloppy with their pencil when they were drawing Hilda's head. That's all it is. It's not the hat. It's not there.
Nope. Okay, somebody asked, I want to know about the cars. Is the repeat car carnage just a hand wave for the sake of action, or does Joanna now have enough income that it's not a problem? Because we saw money problems earlier.
Oh, well, it's a problem. But, poor Joanna, she just can't catch a real solid break here.
She's resilient though. She's a single graphic designer mom, and she knows how to get through. She
can handle this. The car's destroyed this time. The car's gone.
Okay.
Right? It's gone forever. Yeah.
It's not coming back. She was.
Well, it may come back in the form of a ghost.
Okay.
Yeah, there may be car ghosts in this world.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling out that possibility, but I will say that this was the last time the car has suffered any carnage, and now it can rest easy, having been her loyal steed for
the car graveyard.
Yeah. It'll be exactly. She's contributing to the horde of the car parts troll, and I think everybody can now rest easy knowing the true fate of Joanna's yellow car.
Somebody asked, is there troll insurance?
Yeah.
Let's see. We got some questions submitted on Twitter, so we're going to go through some of these. Can you explain the decision to work with Giant Ant and how it works, or what it's like to work with another studio, since that was I guess an almost first. I feel like there was something in season 1 with you guys working with them in the studio, but
I just want to say immediately, I love them because everyone on the production knows you say intro around me and I start just going like
Well, that was the whole impetus for the whole thing, was like was that I had this idea that I knew I wanted to do something special for like the opening of the movie, right? And so I
Right.
pitched this idea to everybody that I felt like we're not doing a main titles like the show has or anything like that, because that's not appropriate. But I don't want to divorce ourselves from the show. I think that the movie is part of the show, that they're two parts of the same thing. It's the Hilda story. And so some really cool bit of connective tissue was taking our title cards that we always get Luke to illustrate like a title card for an episode.
yeah.
And there are these beautiful pieces of art that he puts together. And they've always been such like a stylish, distinct thing that we place up front on any story. And I thought, oh, you know, what would be really cool is if we did one of those, except it was moving and it was alive. And we brought that whole thing to life in like a really cool sort of graphic, abstract James Bond kind of way, where it would tease you up for like the scope of the movie, and we sort of thread visual abstractions through it to represent the overall sort of motifs of the story, and just basically give you a title card gone insane.
Yeah.
And so I know saying that, I was like, oh, okay, now like everybody's gonna hate me too, because this is like the worst possible thing you could possibly bring up to people who are like knee deep in trying to produce a movie. You're like, oh, and I've also got this really cool idea that we're gonna do on top of everything else.
If you had come to me being like, hey, we're gonna do this crazy abstract thing, I would have just like walked out the door and be like, you know how I feel about intros, Andy.
So I had this whole idea, and then I was like, okay, if I try and like load this up on top of everybody who's already working on this movie, which is already like a Herculean task to be trying to make like an epic 2D fantasy movie.
Absolutely.
In a TV budget, you're like, okay, how do we make this happen? It would have been a disaster. So I pitched this idea of like, you know, I feel like this would be a great opportunity for us to look around and try and see if there's anybody who we could work with, who we could welcome into the Hilda family of production companies, that someone who would really be a fan of the show and give a distinct point of view and help me to get this done in a way where they can focus just on this and not have to worry about all the other stuff that's really important in the movie. And so we did audition, you know, just different studios and companies. And for me, like from the beginning, I was like, no, these guys are the ones I want, man. Like they know exactly what I'm talking about. They get this. Their pitch was like excellent. They totally understood the heart of the show. And so then it was just a matter of getting some funding to be able to afford it, and then got that all worked out, which again I am eternally grateful for. There's multiple things that I came up with on this movie that I was like, yeah, and it's gonna cost how much? Like, and it really, I think, was a special addition to like the format and the way people sort of experience this event of a story, that they really knocked it out of the park too. It's one thing to work with people and to sort of have to hammer and to be like pushing and like, you know, being a real sort of like dominant force over that. But with people who sort of are competent and can really work and know what they're doing, it's so beautiful to be able to just sort of come up with cool ideas and then like have competent execution, and you're like, this is so fun, this is so great, this is what, like, it's so amazing to just be part of that process. And they really did some amazing hard work getting that thing together real quick too. It wasn't you know, a luxurious time frame they were working with. And I can't say enough good things about the artists and the people who run the studio. They did a great job. Giant Ape.
Yeah,
Way to go.
absolutely gorgeous, and like it gave us all chills when we watched it,
Yeah.
and it was just it's really great to have people to collaborate with, and I think that's the nice thing about the show is that it's very welcoming to new ideas and new things to try and to do and to push. Like there's a lot of room for that kind of stuff, so anytime there's a chance to be like, hey, yeah, can we approach this a different way than we did the season before or the project before, like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Ryan's music too was like great. His Mountain King theme was like, we had auditioned a bunch of other artists as well for like doing a sort of a theme idea that we could extrapolate from, but it was clear, like, oh no, let's just have Ryan do like a theme, and then we can sort of build out from that and incorporate it into the score of the movie, and it could be part of the experience of the whole thing. And so when we were actually making it, Ryan had done the bit first, like a rough version of our Mountain King theme, and then we had been boarding and cutting to that idea. So it was like all tailored to this stuff, and it was just a really cool collaborative process that ended up in a sequence that I'm really proud of, that I feel like is distinct, and hopefully people dig it.
I think so. I mean, if you look at the reactions to the movie, so many people talking about the opening credits and I didn't even notice that was where he established the Mountain King theme until I was going back and rewatching. I was like, oh wait, and there it is referenced. It's like, it's brilliant. Let's see. Somebody asked, I'd like to know who boarded and directed the scene of Joanna escaping the trolls and getting into her car. Did we already talk about, was that Natalie or?
No, that was sorry, that was someone who animated that, Naomi.
Naomi.
Yeah, right. Naomi animated some of those scenes,
yeah.
And she, like, I can't say enough good things about Naomi Edwards either. Like, she's like an amazing animator who worked on the show, and you can check out her short film that she did a couple months ago. She made this little short.
I'll link it in the chat.
Yeah, she put it on YouTube, and just go check it out, guys, because she is a killer animator. But I'm pretty sure it was Rebecca Champagne did that section of it's like the attack that Cedric gets eaten in, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that was, so Rebecca Champagne, and Jeff Biddle was the storyboard supervisor on the movie too, so he oversaw sort of the process of it, and she boarded that sequence, the whole fight, the chaos, the run to the car, the near miss escape. That was all Rebecca Champagne who storyboarded that out. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Melissa Zhu did revisions on it as well, because we had a really small storyboard team and we all kind of did everything. So it was like, a lot of people probably touched it, but it was Rebecca's section, definitely. And she did such an awesome job on that in particular. Like the chaos of that whole section of Joanna's fight with the trolls was so fun. And when we were editing it, we were like, faster, keep going, and so I temp in this like drum music, and then I'd be like, John, can you just like artificially speed up the drum music and then start cutting everything faster to that, and then just like, and we just kept making it super intense and exhilarating, and we pushed it so that it really had this like deadly serious tone to it that I felt like was really like, it established the stakes and the danger of everything, because I also wanted to make sure that this was a little more complex than just trolls good, humans bad. That there are degrees to these things, and that there are bad trolls and there are bad humans, and there are good trolls and there are good humans.
Yeah. And
that being a troll or a human does not define the content of your character. That like you have to see them as beings, and they're individuals. So the bad dudes, and not to say that even they were unjustified, even if you think of it from their perspective, even it becomes even more nuanced of like, why do they not like people? Well, yeah, who knows what their experience was with people, right? Like, obviously we have more bully antagonist trolls, like the two-headed troll in episode 1 of season 2 and the Stone Forest. R.I.P. Too heady. But also, like, you know, he's a bully. Like, he's not a good person or not a good troll. He's a bad troll. And I think there's degrees of nuance to other characters, like particularly Trundle, who I think has a much more complicated relationship with how he views humans and trolls.
Yeah. Trundle definitely gets the idea of, I'm gonna play the system to my advantage with just going to stand there. He's like, come on, just come at me. I'm not gonna fight back, and I'm gonna ultimately. It's kind of I'm trying to figure out what the movie comparison is, where somebody sacrifices but their plan is still completed. That was a good one, but it's not coming to mind. But
I think
really
that's totally his thing, though, right? Is that this was his plan all along. He knows what he knows. The eye has shown him information that gives him context, that he knows what he wants is to instigate. He wants the humans to retaliate against the trolls because he knows that Emma will not allow it. And that's, I mean, he doesn't specifically know that Alberg has a troll killer gun, but he does know that if the humans retaliate and attack the trolls, that he wins, that's what he wants to have happen. And so when he gets shot at the end and he feels himself breaking and turning to stone, he has like a smile on his face, and it's because he's resigned to this idea that, yeah, I mean, he didn't know specifically that, oh, he was going to die right there, but he knew that was what he was playing with, and that this is what he wants. So he wins in his mind. In that moment, he wins. And only Hilda's willingness to shield Baba from the guns using her body does stay Emma, and change the course of what she would have done had Hilda not done that.
Yeah. How much did the crew know about the Mountain King book before the release? Stuff like having Eric Alberg so early in season 2 established in the safety patrol. How much of that did you know kind of like about the book and say, all right, we need to take this element and put it in season 2 so that the movie works? And I guess you could kind of tie that into like Frida's journey of communicating with creatures so that her moment in the movie works, as well as like, I guess even just little stuff like the Christmas tree getting broken.
We, like, not the whole crew didn't know a lot, but you know, we knew in advance of the whole plan of what we were going to do with season 2. So
yeah, was he writing it, or was he done writing it and it just hadn't been?
Luke was in the process of writing it at the beginning, like, because he kind of had this whole idea of like the Stone Forest and the Mountain King as sort of a vague notion that that was how the story was going to conclude, and so the Stone Forest was already done and out, and so he did know like kind of where we were all going, and it was always the idea, okay, as he's writing this book, this is going to be the climax that we're going to make. So it was very early on. We knew even before like it was done. It was just we knew where we were going. It's just a matter of degrees. And also, you know, the show and the book are two different things. Like, I think you have to look at them as like Batman with Adam West and Batman with Michael Keaton. These are not the same continuities. It's the same property. It's the same general thing, but you know, they're
same intent. But
yeah, and obviously my intent in making stuff is always to honor the books that it comes from, because that's like the pure vision of Luke's creation. You know what I mean? Like it's all him. He just sits in his room and does it. You know, it's a beautiful thing that gives it a real personality and clarity that I think I love and I was always drawn to. And I think if you watch the show, it's like it's more of a smash up of that with other elements, you know, like if you look at the kind of stuff I make and then you look at the kind of stuff Luke makes and then you smash those together, you get like what the show is. And so we were never so beholden to it that we could not pivot and be like, well, we're going to have a different take on this, obviously, because there are differences, I think, in the characterizations and some of the plot mechanics and stuff between the books and the series and movie. But it was always, we were never going to deviate and go into like a crazy hard right where it was like a completely different take on it.
Yeah.
You know? I don't, if you love something and you want to adapt it, why do something else? That doesn't make sense. You know, like why not just do the thing you love and make it, honor it and make it what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, I really love this book, but like, let's change everything and do it differently. Like, well, why even adapt it then? Make your own book. Like,
Exactly.
what are you doing?
Yeah, but kind of with regards to Allberg, because he wasn't really a character in the books till Mountain King, where he gets introduced, but you guys made sure to set him up like very much from season 2, episode 1, that this guy is bad news.
Mhm.
What was it like, kind of tracking his character journey, as well as I know people have commented on how his characterization is very different in the series and the movie, where he's a lot more villainous than the Allberg in the books, who's more of a kind of maybe not so smart authority figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a necessity of having him in so much more material, that we had to give him a really clear personality and defined motivation. And we knew going in, it was like, oh, it's fine. This is a different character. Like the Allberg in the book and the Allberg in the show are two different guys. And our Allberg is driven by vanity and by the need for not necessarily approval, but attention.
Right.
And so it's a different kind of character that's driven by different things. And so our Allberg is an exploration of that kind of thing, which is, well, we knew because we were dealing with like sort of the dynamic of power and fear when it comes to trolls, that we were like, we need a character who's willing to stoke that, and who would do that? Like, that's such a obviously mean and wrong thing to do, that in order to make a person do that, they would have to be driven by something, because no one would do that out of just the sheer like, I'm going to be mean to everybody. Like, that's just not how people work. And so we needed to find an angle on him that would drive him for longer than just like a scene in a movie, that would drive him for multiple stories and show like, why does he act that way? What is he after? And in the case of Allberg, he's this, you know, he's an older gentleman. He's not in his prime anymore. He was like a cool, you know, maybe handsome specimen at one point, but he's moving on in years and maybe he hasn't accomplished all that much. And he wants the world to view him as somebody who is important, somebody. So we all want, really, like on some level, we all have that desire. Like, it's not foreign for people to want to be famous, right?
Right.
Like, this is a natural, innate human quality that we do want to be renowned in some way, on some level. And Allberg just manifests that to a large degree, and it drives him. It drives everything he does. And so, you know, you get people, you know, I've heard them say, you know, the Allberg's redemption arc is really rushed or whatever, but you know, it's not a redemption arc. He's not redeemed. He one time makes the right decision, and he coincidentally gets what he wants when he does that, right? Like, it's the idea of like, in the real world, there are people like this. There are people are driven by this vanity, and he could only see it once it was shown to him in his own image, in a way that like he can put himself in that position. And like, he isn't a different person though at the end of the movie. There's nothing different about Allberg.
What
It's
contributed to his retirement?
Of course. Well, he got what he wanted. He's the hero of Trollberg. He's revered. He stopped Armageddon.
That's true.
And so, like, for him, it's like, well, why would I continue? He doesn't care about safety. He doesn't care about the duty to the people. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. He got exactly what he needed. And that's good for everybody, because he's out of the picture. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
he is fundamentally removed as a threat by having that happen. It's a good ending. It's a happy ending. It's just, if you're looking for some kind of Alberg's a good dude, really,
It's not there.
it's not there. I mean, and we tried to infuse. I didn't want to be too like hit you over the head with it, but you know, you can hear the eye roll in Hilda's read when Bella does the voiceover at the end, or Hilda, and it's like, you know, Alberg got his medal and all this stuff. Like the way we deliver it is with a tongue-in-cheek tone, so that hopefully you can pick up on the idea that like he doesn't deserve to be revered as a hero, but
which is so reflective of like, I mean, I get that Hilda is people's comfort show, and like, you know, it's a fiction, but you know, the reality is people, the youth, let's say, you know, there are a lot of things that you watch and you go, that person, it's all just, it means nothing. That medal, what does it mean? Nothing. It's all pomp. Like,
yeah, what does it really even mean? It just, for him, it's vanity, and he loves it, and that's all he wanted, was just to be revered as a hero like his great grandfather before him, which is an interesting sort of idea too, because when you think about like history and how figures are remembered, and sort of the inkling that, you know, maybe things aren't exactly as you remember them, for these sort of mythical historic figures, in one way or the other. You don't know, like maybe, you know, it could go either way with that.
Let's see.
I saw someone ask who our favorite characters were.
Oh, yeah, so, go ahead.
So Andy, you should.
Who's my favorite character?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's a tough one. David's dad. He's so handsome, and I just thought, like, that guy, he's got something. I don't know what it is, but I like him.
Yeah. I should actually, Erica, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you grab me my lanyard, which is hanging up on my umbrella? I have a button of David's dad on my lanyard. Because like, oh, it's by the gate.
It's by the gate? Oh.
Yeah.
Oops. So many lanyards.
I know. Oh, it's not on. I lied. I'm sorry.
Aww.
Anyway, I'll explain it. But I have this Jeff Biddle, who's our storyboard supervisor. His wife made a bunch of these Hilda buttons, and a lot of them had like David's father and mother on it, because they're based after Andy and his wife.
Yeah.
So like, I had this picture, or this like button of David's dad, but it was like just a frame that happened to be like staring off into space and look completely blank, and I just was like wearing it around on my lanyard, like, yeah, it's got my Andy face just hanging around with me.
It's amazing.
I don't know how to answer that question even seriously though, because I love
Yeah.
it. Obviously Joanna, probably. Yeah, Joanna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite character. Let's be honest.
And then for you, Megan,
Yeah, I got a lot of favorite characters. Like, I relate to Frida the most, because like that is how I function in life. But like, the Woodman is always hilarious. He always has the best lines. He does. But I agree. Like, I think for a lot of the crew, it's Joanna, not because she's like necessarily the favorite, but you just want to do right by her, you know. Like, you just, like, a lot of the crew like just admire, like, Joanna is an important character to us. Like, we don't want to, we're not going to take her for granted. We want to do right by her. So I think she's definitely, maybe because we're older and we relate to the challenges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of bouncing off David's parents and that whole relationship between him and his mom. One of the things a lot of people have talked about is how, you know, there is less for David and Frida to do in the movie just because of the nature of they weren't in the original story, so they kind of had to be worked in all the way along. I know some people read it as David needing to actually talk to his parents about the disagreements instead of avoiding them, but there was never a conversation at the end. I'm curious, how did you read David's arc with his parents? Was there ever more to it? And just kind of talk about that.
Yeah, there was. But ultimately, it's not really the point of what we were trying to explore with it was more about the dynamic of parents and their children seeing the world in like a different way from each other.
Yeah.
How do you live with that difference? How do you, if you have a parent who believes something fundamentally that conflicts with what you believe, it's difficult. And we just wanted to make a comment on the idea that you can come at things from different points of view and still love each other and still care about each other. And I think if you look, like, I never wanted to present his mom as a dummy who fell for Alberg's nonsense. I wanted to motivate her decisions based on her kid being like, the reason she does what she's doing is to protect him. She feels like it's what she can do to do it. And David sees it as, well, you are wrong, and you're the troll, you don't understand, and all these things. You don't see things the same way I do. But I think at the end of the day, she does understand in the moment that, like, she rescues David from the debris at the destruction of the final tower. And I think David in that moment sees her as a protector. And then when David breaks away from her, she sees him as his own guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when he says the line to her, "Mom, I have to go. I have to do this stuff." It hurts her inside, but she knows, she doesn't try to stop him.
Right.
And that those two moments are basically the reconciliation of those two characters, so that at the end, when you get that moment of the two of them standing at a distance, and you can see there's like a tenuous sort of like hesitancy, but then David just grabs her and hugs her.
Yeah.
It's, it's like to say, yeah, there's like this stuff, but we're both trying to be good people. We're trying to do what we think is right, and you can love your parents, and they can be different from
Yeah.
you. It doesn't have to be a fight that you have to win. That's
Right.
not really what it's about. And I think ultimately it would just become a little too on the nose if I left a bunch of like dialogue at the end of like, David, I'm really sorry the way I treated you. Oh, Mom, it's okay. Like, yeah, we get it. And I'm sure they had a real nice conversation afterwards, but that's not really the meat of that relationship in the
Right.
narrative of the movie. So in that moment, I think we just we play it more subtly and more with visual storytelling,
Yeah.
and performance physically, than having to do anything to spell anything out for everybody. And the Frida stuff too was like, I feel like it's not the Hilda and David and Frida show, which I think everybody's sort of conditioned to feel like, because that's what most kid shows are. It's like, oh no, those are your protagonists. Those are your three main characters, Hilda, David, and Frida. But that's not what this show is. This isn't the Hilda, David, Frida show. This is the Hilda show. And David and Frida didn't even come into it until episode 4. So
It's
this is
true.
they're not the main characters of the movie. And I would say I felt good about how Frida connected Hilda at the end to Emma and was able to be the link, to allow Hilda to decode the mystery of what lies beneath Trollberg.
Right.
I felt like that was an appropriate function for her in the story. And there is more we could play with it, but at the end of the day, we're under these constraints of reality that we're trying to work with. And if you're going to sacrifice Hilda and Joanna reuniting for that, it's like, come on. You know what I mean? There's priorities in the story that you need to make sure are given everything they need in order to function, so that when you get to the end of the movie, you're left with this feeling of like, hell yeah, that was satisfying. And if that's what you feel at the end of the movie, you're like, I feel satisfied, then you like it. It's good. It's fine. And sure, it's not all the things you ever wanted it to be. And the Woodman could have been in it, and the Raven could have come back, and it could have been a whole big thing. But like, I honestly feel really good about it, like what we got on the screen, and it I'm left with a feeling at the end of it of feeling like that's really cool, and I feel really like we did it and we resolved stuff, and it feels satisfying. So I hope people can embrace that feeling at least, and know that, like, yeah, just because you didn't see stuff on screen doesn't mean it didn't happen either. Like, there's obviously
Yeah.
full rich lives that these characters inhabit, and it's just a matter of logistics of what you can show on screen.
It goes to show, which is, really nice, that people like what we're doing and want to see more of it. And the more that, we create, and the more that's done, and the more that people see, you have to find a way to keep all that stuff cohesive, because it is a cohesive world, and that's what makes it land. It feels like it has rules and continuity, and it grows. So the more we grow it, the more threads you're going to have that you can go down, right? So many rabbit holes we can explore, and more people expect us to go explore those rabbit holes. And it does, it takes work to actually focus in on just the core story that we need to tell, and making sure that nothing is distracting from that purpose, even if it means we're not exploring certain things, or some characters, get cut or whatever, because at the end of the day, what makes Hilda feel like Hilda is because we're making those choices.
Right.
And there's always going to be, some that work with some people and not with others, and then those other people may have another episode they like more, right? So
that's to say too, to add on to that, I don't begrudge anybody their opinion of it. If like you would like think that's the right thing to do, then I totally respect that too. I just, for me, it felt right to do the stuff that we sort of slotted them in for, and I feel really good at the end of the movie whenever I watch it. So I felt like that, to me, felt like the right way to do it. And obviously I wish we could have done more, but we could do what we could do. And if if you're like, oh, I don't like that this happened or this happened, it's like, I get it,
that's okay.
It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
It's good to have an opinion. Like, this is the thing, right? And a lot of what I've learned comes from watching things and going, what did I resonate with, and what didn't I resonate with, and why? Understanding what impacts me and what doesn't, understanding what I don't like in certain shows and what I would do differently. I mean, all of that, like that's a really good thing to have, is to watch things and question and look into it and dig into it and stuff. I mean, that's why we're talking with you, right? Because it's like you're interested in those things. And so it's like, if anybody looks into these things and goes, oh, this looks rushed, this seems rushed, or this doesn't seem to be concluded, they're not wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're right. Maybe to you, that is sort of like, you were more invested in that, or you picked up on things that, yes, we did put in, but maybe we didn't mean to put that weight in it, but you took it with that weight.
Yeah,
and that's not wrong, because everything's subjective, right?
Yeah.
So everyone's experience is going to be different. And I think what Andy says about, like, it's, as long as it's a satisfying experience.
Yeah, I just want people to watch it and have a good time. As long as that's happening, then I'm happy. And whatever else, you can pick it apart all you want. And I think that's cool too. Like, that's one thing that I've noticed too, is people who talk about the show, or like tweet about it, or make videos about it, like you, Jonathan. It's like that. I think that means so much to me, just because that's like that's also the only way anybody really like gets exposed to it in any real sense. But also it's the process of people experiencing it and having their own sort of like reaction and stuff. And that's why we make stuff anyway. It's not to make it and then just keep it in our basement and never show anybody. It's for that whole interaction. And for better or worse, I hope people come away from the movie feeling good and entertained. And if that's the case, then I feel great.
Oh yeah. I don't think anybody can deny that it's a very entertaining, very fun, very satisfying movie.
Overall, it really feels like people, just with Hilda in general, it feels like people understand what we're trying to do. Like, people are picking up what we're putting down, and that means a lot. And that's why it's really cool when I love watching, like, deep dives into the episodes or just people's thoughts or what they picked up on, because it means a lot that we've made something that warrants someone to want to put their time into understanding it.
Yeah.
Like what more can you ask for?
Absolutely. It's having that conversation with people, and that's why we're here. That's what's so cool about it. Let's see. What was Trundle's brother's name? Do we know? Does he have a
We
name?
never gave him a name, really.
We called him Brundle.
Yeah.
And the animators called him Brundle because he's Trundle's brother, so he's Brundle.
In production, we always refer to him as Trundle's brother. In the script, it was Trundle's brother. In design, we were designing him as the crown troll, but we never really gave him a real name. That's an interesting question because we never really thought about it. So
Yeah,
I think he definitely is an ancient troll that was a part of what happened to Trundle, back at the inception of Trollberg.
yeah.
And I think that is a much more complicated story than people would think. But there's more that goes on there.
What's your reading of the story of the Mountain King as told by Trilla? Since you said you think there's more there, do you have like a personal reading of it, or?
Well, I would just say that there's been many years since that happened, and that you ever play a game of what do they call it when you whisper in somebody's ear?
Telephone.
Yeah, and things get sort of distorted over time, and there may be some inaccuracies in the way that things are perceived, particularly when it comes to the relationship between certain humans and certain trolls, and how that works and how that fed into what happened to Trundle. There's possibilities beyond which you could really imagine, but I won't say anything else about that for now, because
get going, fanfic writers.
Yeah,
it's all for you.
Absolutely. I was really curious about Trundle's brother while watching, just because he seemed like, well, first you kind of have the idea of, you look at the marketing for the movie and the initial teaser posters with him, and then he's the final shot of the title card is him kind of slowly approaching, and then you get to his appearance and it's like, oh, he's not this grand majestic troll. I mean, he is, but he's pretty, he can move around and hold his own in a fight and that sort of thing. Was there ever a discussion kind of in development about, we want to make this subversion so that if people, go into the movie, they think, oh, this is the Mountain King, and then he's not?
That was the idea. That was when we were designing, Luke designed that idea in the book. As that was a subversion. And so we knew going into it, we're like, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. Because you don't want to give away the nature of Trundle.
Right.
Not that you can't parse it out if you want. You could follow and you could put the threads together as you're watching, but that's not what you want to know from scene one.
Right.
There's really delicate, specific physicality to the way Trundle presents himself in the first scene that we see him. The way he speaks even was a really deliberate choice when we cast him, was to give him this sort of disarmingly friendly, casual tone,
right,
delivered in this powerful voice, but in a real softball way. Right. So we're not playing it up. We're not having him and doing big theatrical performance. He's like, hey, I'm just a guy. Oh yeah, no big deal. Let's just all hang out. And he portrays himself in this way. And then physically, he also is very careful in that first meeting where he stays very still, and then he lays down and he just sort of puts himself in very vulnerable positions physically, so that Hilda and the audience feel oh, well, this is a guy that we are a little bit endeared to, that we sort of feel for his plight being imprisoned in the cave. And I'm sure that some people immediately have red flags going off, but that's okay too, because it's about the journey of experiencing it. And I wouldn't want to just have everybody go in knowing that he was the Mountain King. And I liked playing that a much more a subversion to be discovered. Because that moment is so great too. Like when we're at the cave,
Oh,
where Trilla is like, Hilda, what have you done? And the bells, they used to hang here. Where did they go? And like this whole, you feel like the pit of your stomach dropping because you're like, oh, this is like totally not good. This is all going to hell. And it really, you feel the gravity of that moment really nicely, I think, with some of the buildup of, as the meetings with Trundle go on, you start to be like, there's serious bad news going here with this guy. He's manipulating Hilda. He's not sincerely vulnerable. He's intentionally vulnerable to try and get her to drop her guard. And then he amps things up. Even little exchanges like, oh, what, you're in such a hurry, you have no time to chat? And feeling like, oh, you insulted me, to just put her on the back foot and then go, never mind, actually, here's what I want you to do. Exactly. And like this whole dance of Trundle manipulating her is just what he does. He sees her as a human, he's like to him, she's the enemy. And I think it's a really delicate idea to then have sort of his flip side, the other side of the coin, his brother, be sort of like that. It's like a mythical almost dynamic, Romulus and Remus. It's this idea of the good son and the bad one, and that it's not as black and white and simplistic as that, but that they've both chosen sides and they happen to be on the opposite side of one another. And that I hope it's clear from how we performed his brother that he does love Trundle. Yeah. But that they've made certain decisions about things that they need to hold themselves to. And that at the end, when he lays his gem staff down on Trundle's remains, it's just sort of a final moment to view his grief in losing his brother, that he did care about him a lot. And I think that Trundle would have cared about him too. Trundle wasn't like a heartless, mustache twirling villain. I think he did what he did for him.
He was like, I won't hurt you, brother. Like, presumably, they'd had a lot of conflict in the past. He's like, look, man, I'm done. I'm not gonna hurt you.
He doesn't want to hurt him. He wants to save him. He wants to free Amma, and he wants to get rid of the humans. And that's, it's unfortunately, from our perspective, pretty dastardly thing to want, but he feels justified.
He's actually kind of the opposite of Alberg in the sense that he has almost no ego, whereas Alberg is like all ego. As far as two sides of the villain coin. I remember what I was going to say earlier about Alberg, the line where he was like, people don't need practical solutions, they need something to look forward to. I was like, that's the line that perfectly summarizes his motivation.
And the stuff that comes out of his mouth is always just like, Alberg, what? But like it comes from a place of like aspiration. In his mind, he's like, no, that's a good thing, right? And then like it's one of those things where like you say something and you immediately afterwards you're like, oh, that sounds awful. Why did I say it that way? But like Alberg doesn't have that moment afterwards. He just rolls with it and he's like, no, I meant to do that. That's fine. Let's continue.
I know so many people don't like Alberg, which I mean, like that just means like everybody did a good job, But like I will say that he was an animator favorite to animate. Maybe his rig was a little laggy, but he's big and broad and like you can push him a little further. So like I love speaking out of like people animating certain things, but like Julianne Martin, she animated a lot of like the Alberg acting scenes. Well, a lot of people did, but like it's just certain people really picked up on Alberg so well and like pushed his personality in this movie way more than it was in season 2. And I loved it. I was like, oh yeah, look at him. He's ridiculous. It's terrible.
I absolutely felt that, especially in the scene where Joanna goes to him and like he almost like moves around the room like a snake. Like he gets the gun and he's like, I'll take you there personally.
It's theatricality is what he does. Is he's putting on a show for everybody. And you only see him drop that a couple times in the movie. Like you see him drop it when he's alone in his office before the patrol guard comes in, and you see him put it back on when the patrol guard opens the door, and he does like a switch where he's like, oh, good news, I assume. And he's back to being theatrical Alberg. And then you see him drop it at the end when he sees through the eye of the Mountain King. There's a sober moment, right? I didn't show a lot because I didn't feel like, I'm going to retread this entire hallucination and just show it with Alberg. So we just like, it's the Cliff Notes version of it in the movie where you're like, we get it. We know what that was like. He had that experience, but you get that sober moment where he like his face drops and he says without any hint of theatricality, mother. And you can hear like in his voice that he's not putting on a show anymore. It's just those couple little moments where he drops his act that I think are, you can get a glimpse into a real person underneath that like show that he puts on.
Did you guys do a full character design for his mom for the one scene, or was that just something you were like, abstract it?
We just designed her. No, maybe we did a couple sketches of her as a human, and then the only real finished design we did was that one shot of his mother as the stand-in for Emma in the vision. But we did sort of extrapolate from just some rough sketches of what we were gonna try and do with her.
Somebody asked, and you talked about this a little bit on Twitter, Andy, about the time jump at the end. How long has it been since the original movie's events, and how old are Hilda and the kids if they have specific ages? Kind of talk about that.
Well, it's like I'm not being too specific about it.
The ambiguity is part of the fun.
They're older, and obviously it's been at least a year because we do see a flashback to the Night of the Trolls, which happens once annually. But I don't want to get too specific about the time. I will say that we will answer the question eventually.
Okay. The infamous birthday episode. No, I don't know.
The show's not over, so we will answer that question eventually. I think it has been some time, and one thing I'll say too is that like I was intentionally obfuscating a lot of stuff too, so like you don't ever get a clear view of Hilda or Frida and David, and then even when you do, that's not happening at the same time as when we're seeing Hilda, so that's earlier than what we're seeing in Hilda. So everything is sort of like leaving it open because we're going to answer that question.
Cool. Good way to put it.
That was very smooth of you. I liked that. Yeah.
I'm excited for that. Was there any reason, I know we talked about this a little bit before the interview, but was there any reason behind the aspect ratio change for the movie and getting that approved, or was that?
There's a lot of reasons really. I think obviously, like we were talking about before the stream, I love just like the compositional appeal of it, like to play the ratios of a wider framing. There's so much more varied contrasts you can play with visually, and it's just a different presentation of your stuff, which was also linked to some of how I wanted to execute the movie in a way that was a little different than the TV show, in the sense that narratively it's about perspective, it's about seeing things through a different perspective, and I wanted Hilda to see the world through a different thing. So even the stuff that we've seen before, we see it different in the movie. Like the library, we have like this, our stock library establishing shot, but in the movie, we don't use that stock library establishing shot. We do a whole new angle that's like complementary of our ratios and contrasts in the new anamorphic ratio. And the same thing with Hilda's apartment. That when we first come to Hilda's apartment, we don't use the stock Hilda's apartment establishing shot. We use new angles. We're trying to like show the old world through a new lens. We're trying to see it a little differently for this, to help reinforce that change in point of view, the shift in how we understand the world of Trollberg. And outside of that, there was the exhibition concerns about just like how we were going to show this movie, and I had always wanted to show it theatrically, and obviously the coronavirus that has plagued the planet for the last little bit. Had other plans when it came to that, but we would have loved to have done more in festivals and in holding
Yeah.
events and
Maybe one day. I know they do those rent a
Yeah.
theaters. Maybe you could do one of those like.
We did that for the crew. We had
Oh.
like we were able to screen it for the crew before it came out on Netflix. And that was really nice. Like it was like all social distancing. We all, vaccines only, that sort of thing. But it was really nice and rewarding to be able to sit down with everybody and all watch it together on the big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did this awesome mix for it too, and like it was going to be this really great experience to see it in a theater. And unfortunately, nobody has really, besides the crew, ever gotten to do that. But hopefully soon, sometime it could happen. It would be really fun to be able to see it that way for everybody. But that was it, and also like novelty too, where it's like, I don't like doing the same thing over and over and over again, and this was just one new way to try out, like, to keep it fresh and interesting. And I don't like, that's fun to me to stretch and try to face different challenges visually to play with that stuff. So it was also a little bit of a selfish choice of just like, I don't want to frame things the same way anymore. I just want to like
do something new. Give yourself a challenge.
Play around, yeah. I think it's like those big fun shots that you can get out of that kind of aspect ratio, where I could open up the world when like you want to get these big shots of little Hilda as compared to the vast landscape. And I think it really, for me, felt like the right move, and everybody coincidentally agreed on the and
Nice.
that's how we did it. I love it. I think it's really cool, and I'd love to do it. The next show I do, I'm going to demand it's an anamorphic. That's my new edict. Is like, oh, I'm not doing anything unless it's anamorphic, and I don't care.
That's the beauty of streaming, is you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, I miss the extra room, because it is just it pushes the boundaries, and I think that's been really great on Hilda just over the years. Is like every season we're going to do something new or try something new, and like even next week I'm going to be sitting down with people and we're going to be discussing, okay, we've done this thing before, but let's figure out a new way to do it. And push it further than we did in this season. And everything is just like it's a tool, right, for us not to just tell stories, and like we obviously want to tell good stories and have like a great experience for people, but we also want to grow and learn ourselves and to like push ourselves. And it's really lucky that we have a show that we're on that has a great team, has a lot of trust in it, to be able to experiment and try things out. And that doesn't always happen in animation. Sometimes you can be working with a broadcaster or with like a production team that or like producers that don't give you that, and they're really like strict, or they have very particular ideas, and it's different for every show. Absolutely right. And it is really great that we have people from the top, all like for every department, that like trust and believe in the show and kind of know what we're trying to do. So even we obviously every once in a while, like, people have different opinions, or one side wants this and someone else kind of wants that, but we're all really aligned to the same goal. So it gives us freedom to try new things, and we normally get like really great results and really great support for any new idea.
The next one is a fan curiosity question. What are the names of the characters whose names haven't been said on screen, like David or Frida's parents, Trevor's friends, or any of the Mars besides Kelly? Do you guys have names for them, or do they just kind of go in the script as David's dad, David's mom?
Yeah, in the script we just refer to them like that. Some of them do have those sort of like names that we've worked out, or were mentioned in scripts but then cut out, and I can't remember exactly.
I think the only time I can really think about it were the Vikings. Like the Vikings had names, but like even the ones that weren't like said
Yeah,
out
even though we
loud
didn't
had
say their
names.
names, they all had specific names that we had worked out in advance.
Yeah.
There are, like, I'm sure there's a couple, but nothing comes to mind right now.
Okay.
Like the Mara was like Mara 1, Mara 2, Mara
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
I think we did have a couple of names for them, but I can't
Yeah.
remember. I think we were just calling for production code purposes, like the main Mara and the Nightmare Spirits Twin Tails.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I gave her a name beyond that. That's not to say I would never give her a name. And just not at the moment. I can't think
Yeah.
of it like
The next
The
question.
fans are just gonna have to give everybody a name.
Oh yeah, there you go. There you
Make
go.
one up. There you
Yeah.
go.
Leave it to the fanon. Somebody asked, there's plenty of key differences between the book and the film, but which difference or addition would you say stands out the most from the book or makes the movie not necessarily better, but different? Like, is there a significant change, maybe something that added, the movie kind of, I mean, you talked a little bit about how the book is, Adam West and movies, the other one, but I'm just curious about that.
That's an interesting question. I'm like, I mean, there are things in the movie that are obviously not in the book, just by the nature of the differences in the two worlds. But I mean, I don't really think of it differently. Like, I don't think of the scenes that are like featured in the book and ones that are not featured in the book as like any differences. I think because the big thing was perspective in the movie was the point of view. A lot of times is very different than what it is in the book. Even if it's a direct adaptation of a scene, it's presented in a different perspective. Because I was very careful and deliberate about everything. Like, if you look at the way, sort of the opening scene, for example, when Hilda first is in the stone forest trying to escape, and like I tried to root it in Hilda's perspective in that moment, and so everything is scary and dark and because that's how she's feeling. She's scared and she's alone and she's confused. And so there's none of the comedy that's in the book has lots of comedy. Oh, look who we have here. Ooh, a skin bag. You're muted, Megan.
I said one of them anyway. I don't even know if you can hear her growl. Oh, anyway, she's very grumpy today, but I give her love.
It happens.
Yeah, but yeah, it's I think it's more about perspective. Like like when Hilda she experiences the bells for the first time. I'm using sort of this first person camera sometimes to try and like change the perspective of how we're experiencing the scenes. And the movie is ultimately about seeing things from a different perspective. So,
Yeah.
I think it was part of the whole package. I don't know, like I love all the scenes in the movie. We were talking about earlier, the troll fire thing. When Trilla tells Hilda about the story of the Mountain King and lets it play out in the flames of troll magic, and it's just such an interesting like visual way to give audiences information that isn't stock execution of just like, oh, and now we're going to flash back to when this happened. And just I always find flashbacks like really boring for me to do. I only ever agree to do them if they are giving us information that we have not already seen. I hate flashing back to things that we've already seen. And even then, I just don't like it in general. So I always try to find some weird, interesting way to do that without just being linear about it and predictable.
Yeah, I feel like
that was a fun thing.
Yeah, I feel like flashbacks, especially of scenes you've already seen in the thing you're watching, it's kind of displays a lack of trust in the audience.
Yeah, exactly. That's what bugs
yeah.
me about it, is that it either means you haven't done your job properly and communicated what you needed to communicate, or you think the audience is dumb.
Yeah, I always think of and I love Spider-Man 3, but in Spider-Man 3, like during the end of it, when he's trying to figure out how to defeat Venom, he like it like zooms in on his face and shows back to when he was taking off the suit with the bell and the suit was fleeing from it and then comes
Yeah.
back out. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
you just put it in the middle of the action, but
Yeah, you're like, I get it. I don't need the flashbacks. That was one thing. A movie that I really liked was Shyamalan's Signs.
haven't
And then,
seen
like,
it, but it's on my list.
the end of it, there's like all these flashbacks to spell things out for you. And you're like, I didn't need those. It would have been
Yeah.
so cool if you didn't give me those flashbacks and I put that together for myself.
Yeah.
I would have felt so awesome. It's still good. It's still a great, like, tied together conclusion, but the flashbacks get me, man. It's like always bother me.
Yeah.
Flashbacks and helmets.
Yeah, bike helmets and flashbacks, two things that I kind of buy.
Pacing wise, was it difficult to balance so many characters in one story? Kind of that, as well as like tracking the time. Like we have things that happen during the day, and we have to get all of the characters who have day scenes before we cut back to the mountain, and it has to be night. And
Yeah, there was
tracking all-
challenges there with like trying to figure out, okay, but we can't show that right now because we have to pace it in a way where it linearly makes some sense. And so it was like, oh, if this takes place in daytime, we can't do that right now. We got to wait till it's daytime to show that scene. And there's concerns there about like how to craft specific things and make it work. And obviously, I don't think it was anything innately challenging about like managing that many characters. It was just challenging in the sense of what we were working with to manage what we had to manage. Because it was, obviously we're just a little show. We're not like this $200 million massive endeavor. So I had to work within certain confines and still pull it off in a satisfying way is always a challenge. But I didn't feel particularly taxed too much on that stuff. It was more the emotional threads that were my main focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was kind of looking through the chat to see if we missed any big questions. Are all the trolls we saw in the series and the movie as well? Do they belong to a single generation of trolls?
There's a whole bunch of generations. And so there are trolls we see in the series that do show up in the movie. And we were very particular about like, okay, who's the trolls that have the capacity to be aggressive and who's the trolls that are very much benign? And so
We like tracked the aggressiveness of the troll. Like I had a whole list, a whole cheat sheet of like
who's on what side of the issue of how they react to humans. And so some trolls are more naive, some trolls are more aggressive, and we had sort of isolated out certain ones who could be like more susceptible to hating humans and would join up with.
That's a crazy amount of detail.
I feel like if I really want to blow people's mind, I will post my troll tracking sheets, because I went through every single scene and labeled what trolls were, because a lot of the troll crowds, like if all of those trolls were harmony regs, your scene wouldn't be able to open. Is this too many? So a lot of them are just like background PNGs that we have like an eye blink on, but it has to be like each crowd shot is specifically structured to be economic. So maybe the back row is all PNG and the main troll that's acting is a full rig, and then maybe another set of trolls that are moving but in a more limited fashion are like more lightly built. And so like I actually section out each troll shot. That's a combination of a bunch of things. I did the same with the ghosts in the second season. So, but with that, each troll had to be labeled because the storyboard artists, aren't labeling each troll. So I had to not only say what section was what, I had to label each troll. Okay, this has to be this troll here, so several scenes later it can do this, and there has to be this troll here because it's a good troll, and the angry troll has to be over there. Like the amount of tracking and like you can't just say, hey, it's a troll group shot and allow the animators to like put in random trolls, because it's not going to hook up.
Right.
So I think it took me like a good day to actually like go through it and adjust it. But I hope everybody noticed that the Bones troll was in the original group that stormed with Trundle because
Yeah,
he
he's
wanted
aggressive,
Bones.
man. That guy, you gotta
I
be
was
careful.
like, I was like, we have to have the Bones troll. So you'll see the little Bones troll at the end, which I'm like, of course. Why wouldn't the Bones troll be there? This is the perfect opportunity to get Bones.
Yeah. Was somebody asked, was the first troll that we see in the series in that very first episode, was that Trilla?
No, it was never intended to be, but it could be interpreted that way. Like because like we have sort of the generic troll look, and there's other trolls that look like Trilla.
Yeah.
I didn't intend that to be her. I mean, even at the time we were doing that, we didn't even know who Trilla was going to be. Like,
Yeah, because
we
it's like
didn't-
we didn't even know we'd have a season 2, right?
That's that's true.
Yeah.
it was just in the first episode. It could be interpreted that way. There's no reason to say it isn't.
Yeah.
So if
Looks
you
similar
want to
enough.
connect those dots, I think that's a fun exercise. Like you could go a step further and say the troll in episode 5 of season 1 is Trilla, and that's young Baba that was running around. You know, like
Yeah.
there's ways you could try and connect those dots. I never intended that, but that could be a realistic way to interpret it.
Yeah.
It's part of the growing world, right? Like a lot of things do have intent, and we're going, yes, we intended that to be there, but I mean, we are also just contributing things as we're going through and it evolves, right? So
Yeah.
as much as it would be cool to have everything laid out like directly on episode 1, the reality is, yeah, we didn't know anything past season 1.
Yeah.
And
We just had vague sort of
Yeah.
intentions of what the world was, and then you start to build on that as you go. And so we can leave this stuff to mine, but it's not, that character in particular was not, Trilla was not a thought when we were making the midnight
Yeah.
jump. You know?
Can you talk about bringing the finale to life with the trolls finally walking in, connecting with their mother, both Ryan Carlson's music for that, and just how powerful that is, as well as kind of the storybook style of like was that an idea that came from like kind of the idea of, you know, like the opening credits where it's inspired by Luke's drawings that he did, or like how did that whole thing come to be?
That was specifically a very delicate, long process of storyboarding that out. It was a real hands-on thing where everybody was in it and trying to come up with this really satisfying epilogue to the movie, to resolve all that stuff. So everything after the fight at the wall was like laboriously planned out and executed. It I knew I wanted the sequence of like when Frida links Hilda to Amma, that I wanted to, again, like not just literally show the past, but to interpret it in some way abstractly, to help sort of complement the idea that you're not really hearing her voice, but it's a translation of what she's saying. And so you're not seeing this literally, but you're seeing a representation, and it all feels like a language almost. It's like pictograph.
Right.
And it feels like she's speaking to you when you watch the sequence. And then when I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we do with that sort of imagination sequence? And I've done stuff like that before, like in the Yule Lads, when I want to like show stuff, I just try and do it more interestingly than literally putting the camera back and showing the audience that. But I didn't want to do like a different style for that. I felt like, oh, it would be cool if we tied the mother troll language into that visual sort of storybook illustrative style. And so we went back afterwards and fleshed that whole story out, and Melissa Zhu did that storyboard part, that little sequence for the story. And then the music, that was something we worked out in editing, which was we had one long musical sequence, basically the whole end. We were like, let's just drive this whole thing with music, and let's give it the really um it's delicate, like but it's persistent, and it drives and it evolves, and it carries us through this stuff that's happening, because really it's about watching it, and we are with the characters watching that whole thing unfold and experiencing it. So we're just sort of connected to them as an audience. They're standing in the sea of trolls and watching this cool thing happen. And then and again, we thought about having other artists come in and supply like a licensed track for that section, to do like sort of a real, like take a band and have them do a song there, a custom made song. We've done stuff like that before in the past, like when we did the windmill, and even our end credit song. Like we've done stuff where we've reached out to artists and said, like, we got this thing, it would be really cool if you could provide something, and they've done it, but we couldn't find anything that really fit. And so at the end of it was just like, and again, just like the main theme, I was like, let's talk to Ryan, let's get Ryan to do a take on this, and see what, because he knows the world, he knows the whole thing, he can string this along, and he can give me the ins and outs that I need to sustain something that long, because it's a lot of screen time
It is.
to drive by music, so you have to stay interesting, or you're just going to lose people. I think, that's one of the coolest parts too, is at the very end, I love like letting that breathe when we do our final shot, where we show sort of like the balance of Hilda and Trollberg, the mountain and Trollberg, the two different worlds, the wilderness and the urban city, that we let that breathe enough, and we let the music sort of carry us out. And I mean, it was funny because when you're editing it, it's just black. And so I left. It's like, it's a ridiculous amount of seconds of black, right? And I kept getting it sent back, and questions from post-production being like, is this right? Is there supposed to be like 15 seconds of black or something here? Like, yes, we're gonna fill it with music. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be awesome. Just let it breathe. And I love doing stuff like that. And it sucks that when you're doing a TV show, it's so hard to do that because you're always fighting for runtime. But like, just to be like, yeah, I'm going to take as long as I want on this black, just let it stop. And we're going to ring out and ring out and ring out and ring out and ring out. And then we're going to bring in our end credits because we got time. Let's do it.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. All right, I'll make this the second to last question because it's the last major character in the film we haven't talked about. Deputy Gerda and her relationship with Alberg and kind of her journey in the story. What was it like kind of getting to write, or not, I guess because Luke wrote it, but getting to kind of facilitate that conclusion to her character journey and getting to finally stand up and say no to Alberg?
It was a long time coming. We always knew Gerda was the real.
She's the real safety patrol.
Yeah, she is the protector. And she's driven by a sense of duty and honor, and she wants to protect, and that's not what Alberg is at all. And so from the outside, you're like, the reason she does what she does is because she believes in this mission.
Yeah.
And that from that place, that kind of a character is so likable because she is so selfless and willing to protect others, that when she's faced with this sort of slow encroachment of realizing like things are not how Alberg says they are, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and she's seeing things throughout season 2 and into the movie that contradict her nature, that eventually she comes to a point where she'll be willingly insubordinate, which for her is massive.
Yeah.
Like, that is the most extreme thing she could ever do, is to be derelict in her duty. For somebody like that, it's very important. And for her to just basically tell him, no, I'm not doing that, to just completely abandon everything that she defines herself as, was powerful, I think, to me, and I felt like that was the right thing to do for her, rather than have her like have some more theatrical action physical sequence where she like fights Alberg or something. It's like, I think that doesn't say as much about her character than having her do the thing that would mean the most, which is to disobey an order.
And really,
And-
that's where it like starts. You know, like most people, their victories are not the big grand like huge thing. It is like the stuff that you're battling inside, you know.
Right. All right. So last question. I'll give you a chance to say anything else you want to say about the movie as well. But what do you hope people take away most from the movie?
Damn, I don't know. What do I hope people take away most from it? I hope they take away a good time, you know,
Yeah.
at least, and like to be sort of wrapped up in this world a little bit and enjoy it, and maybe share it with somebody else too. Like I think that would be my biggest thing, is to watch it with somebody and you know, share it together. Hopefully, I mean, it is, at the end of the day, we're just making fun entertainment, adventure, fantasy. Like I hope it makes people feel good. I hope it makes people think about stuff, and but ultimately, if you just have a good time and share it with somebody, then I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's sort of, I mean, what it is. Like we're not setting out to tell people you should think this way, or like this is our message and you have to agree. Like we're not, all these themes and these things to write and explore and to conclude. It's to make a satisfying story and a complete experience. It's not to kind of bash you over the head with a message, you know, and kind of like what you said, it's like, you know, trusting that the audience will pick up on it, and the audience is going to pick up on different things depending on who they are as people. And really, at the end of the day, all you can ask for is just like, did you have a good time watching it? Do you get that feeling of like, oh yeah, that was, I could sit and be and have a moment where all I'm sort of doing is just enjoying this thing in front of me. Like if, especially nowadays, like if you can have a movie or a story or a show that people can watch without being on their phone, and I say that as someone who has stuff up all the time as I'm doing like several things, like that's something, right? Like that's actually, like that's the real movie experience, right?
It's a huge achievement. Yeah.
It's to be engrossed in it. So I hope people have that experience and go, oh yeah, that feels great, you know. And that's sort of the real takeaway, because anything beside anything like, oh, I want people to take away that like colonialism is bad, or this is bad, or this is good. It's like, no, yeah, you can make your own conclusions on that stuff. I don't need to want you to take anything away from that, because people are going to take away things anyway, right? So just as long as it was a good experience, and yeah, that's kind of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other stories from production you want to share? Just fun little anecdotes or things you think like.
Yeah,
Any
maybe
good-
let's think here. There's some like fun little bits that like I like to like hide little things in the show and in the movie too that are like interesting, fun little tidbits that I don't think anybody's really caught a couple of them yet that I've seen it. Maybe I'm sure people have, but I don't follow that stuff that closely, so I'm not really sure how prevalent it is. No one's brought it up to me, but did anybody realize like that you could see the light cannon being constructed in episode 12 of season 2?
Oh, someone did catch that, actually. I saw it on Twitter. Yeah, but I think maybe the people who like rewatched the season before the movie came out would probably pick it up a little bit closer. But yeah, that's in episode 12.
When Hilda's breaking into the safety patrol compound, you can see it being constructed in the bunker.
I missed that.
There's a bunch of little things like the stick that Frida uses in the spell with Hilda's hair. That's the stick in the stone forest that Hilda's playing with in her room at the beginning of the stone forest.
Oh.
There's a lot of little like connective bits like that. I will say there might be like a hint or two of things to come for Hilda hidden in the movie. Places.
Everyone's just like, boom, let's go analyze
You know,
everything.
maybe just those things we'll touch on. I don't know. We'll see. And I don't know, there's other little fun bits that were in there too, like the sword in Hilda's room that she still has that like sword from the witch's tower.
Oh yeah.
Did you add that when you were doing your pass?
Yeah, I drew
I knew it
into
because I was watching it. And I'm like, wait, because people were posting it, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember that sword in that scene. It's because like I'll see every scene like a ton of times going through animation, and then Andy sees it a ton of times more. But yeah, he's working on it afterwards. So
the gems in Trundle's brother's staff are the gems that are lining the cave of Trundle's prison. That's a fun little like detail that no one's picked up on yet, I don't think.
oh, someone just mentioned in the chat about the cod sandwich in the
right, yeah. There's a lot of stuff in that research room that they're really
the cod sandwich
to get to the bottom of.
The ectoplasm that's like all goopy,
yeah, ghost ectoplasm
the ghost ectoplasm from the ship. Yeah.
There's there's lots of fun little bits. There was more in there, but we had to like tone it down a little bit because we were getting like a little too crazy with
it adds, it's a lot of details to track,
this is getting visually like distracting. We are that's a little too much.
I think somebody was like, there's a Minecraft SMP reference in the troll stash or something.
Well, it's like the thing is that there's references we put in and there's references people think we put in, and one of them that I see all the time is like Bill's cipher.
Yeah, people talk about that with the triangle and the eye.
Yeah, and it's like that existed before Gravity Falls. The all-seeing eye was there before Gravity Falls. But this is the thing, or references to Steven Universe or this or that. And it's like most of the references you're going to find in Hilda, if you find anything directly, is going to be referencing or doing like homages to like live action movies. Right. More so than anime. Yeah, not to say those shows aren't amazing,
Yeah.
But the stuff that we put in is like, and it's the same sort of thing about the kind of like nebulous time that it's in. The stuff we put in on the show are things that we really respond to. And although I do like Steven Universe or Gravity Falls, I'm going to be pulling from things that like are more my childhood sort of jazz if I'm doing a childhood thing. So
like the Pennywise's lair is the Rat King's entrance to his sewer.
Oh, yeah.
From like the 1990 It miniseries. If you go just Google Pennywise's lair in the 1990 It miniseries, and then go look at the entrance to the sewer at the harbor.
Yeah.
Where it's like we're just like incorporating all these little things into the show, and sometimes people don't even catch things that I feel like are super obvious, but they just sort of like don't, like no one's caught the tide mice running around in the apartment.
Oh, in the movie?
In the season 2 before we did the first incident. But that's there's some I was like, no, there's no way someone's gonna miss this. But no, I've never seen anybody tell me that they caught it, even people on the crew.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the details. There's always more to uncover world-wise. I know I binged the whole series again with my sister because she hadn't seen it to watch the movie, and it's amazing how well it all connects. I forget, like you were saying at the beginning, how much Kaisa isn't in season 1. I'm like, oh, we don't even know her name till season 2.
Till season 2, yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's just the kind of the world building. You get lost in it while you watch it, and it's just kind of, it all meshes together so well.
It's the fun of doing fantasy stuff. Is like, this is like, it's so much fun to play in a world like that, where you can just sort of make the world itself part of the entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to close out the formal part of the interview. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Be sure to tune into the Second Dimension for more interviews, and leave a comment about who you'd want to hear from next so I can see who to bring onto the show. So from Andy and Megan and myself, we'll see you back in Dimension 1. And I should have had the transition ready. There we go. All right, bye.